Today's show is brought to you by KegConnection.com. Join the free Brewers Club Rewards program at KegConnection.com and start earning and spending points with every purchase. You'll also earn status perks, which allows you to receive bonus points and free gifts from KegConnection.com. Go to KegConnection.com right now and use the promo code HHH to receive 5% off your order. That's KegConnection.com, promo code HHH.
Entertaining shows with content that spreads information and sparks discourse throughout the community. This is the Pearl Media Network.
Welcome to the Homebrew Happy Hour. This is the show where we supply the answers to your homebrewing questions and discuss all things related to craft beer. If you have a question that you would like discussed on a future episode, visit homebrewhappyhour.com and click on the Submit a Question link at the top of the page. Or now you can call or text them in by using 325-305-6107. I am your host, Joshua Stubing, and today I'm joined by the Director of Operations at cmbecker.com, Mr. James Carlson, as well as the President and Chief Keg Washer at KegConnection.com, the still sober for dry January, Mr. Todd Burns.
Yay, sobriety.
Yeah.
Not all it's cracked up to be.
I don't want to not say yay because that would make me sound shallow and like an alcoholic. But I am super proud of you because most people, and I wouldn't even, this isn't a resolution, right? Like this is just something you've done before. It's not like you said, I'm going to do this for this January, or would you call this a New Year resolution? I don't know if we've discussed it enough.
I do it for January sometimes. I mean, yeah, it's not like a resolution where I'm not going to drink anymore. I just stop drinking. I think that I will find it more enjoyable when I start again because I'll be able to appreciate the finer qualities and taste and smells of the beers after being away for a month.
That sounds very romantic.
Yeah.
I think maybe I need to make better habits like that because if I was like, hey, I'm going to make a New Year resolution and I'm not going to eat breakfast cereal for the entire month of January because I want to be healthier.
You could never do that.
That's what I'm saying. That's my point. And I probably couldn't do it for a multitude of reasons, but one being that every time I make a resolution, I somehow sabotage it and in dramatic fashion. I actually joked, so I didn't mention it on the show last week, but a couple weeks ago, as y'all both know, my pop, unfortunately, was rushed to the hospital. He thought he was having a heart attack. He wasn't rushed to the hospital. He went because he thought he was having some heart issues, and it turns out, lo and behold, he was definitely having heart issues. He has atrial fibrillation and AFib for short, for us who know now, or in the know of medical terms. And I was joking with friends that it's my fault because I publicly made a resolution that I wanted to brew more with my dad. And immediately, boom, he has heart issues. So sorry, Pop, for ruining your new year, but we are going to start brewing again together soon. But I don't know where I was going with that. Something about resolution and breakfast cereal. And then I went into my dad's heart problems. Anyway.
No, we're talking about not, I think we talked about it last time, but it's a big English thing. I just did it not because anybody else was doing it, but when I started doing it, like one of my cousins is like, "Oh, you're doing dry January?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not drinking in January. What does that mean?" And then I found out that it's a huge thing in the UK for some reason.
Yeah. Well, so, you are English, aren't you? Isn't your family English?
Yeah, it depends on who I'm trying to impress. So
that's what I say with
some sides say German, and then some sides say English. We're not really sure. I think we were fleeing creditors at the time, so some things haven't changed in 5 generations. So,
oh my gosh, that's the best. Yeah, I do that too with my Latino side. If I'm trying to impress people, I add an accent when I'm ordering tortillas.
God.
Anyway, and James is a proud. Oh no, I'm gonna mess it up. You're Norwegian, right?
Yep. We came in across the pond in 1880s. I believe that's right.
I remember because we talked about it when we were in where. Oh gosh, what city was it?
In Minneapolis.
Thank you. That's what it was.
Yep. Yeah, the Carlson clan either landed in Texas or in Minnesota. Don't ask me why, but that's just the way it was.
Yeah, I remember, and it wasn't that long after that we started using or trying out the Omega yeast strains, which those are Norwegian, right? Or am I putting my foot in my mouth?
Yeah, they have a farmhouse Norwegian Quebec, I think is how you say that. And they would reuse yeast from the previous batches, and they would have it in bags that looked like flakes, like corn flakes, and that was actually yeast. And they'd use it over and over again. But I'm just not a big farmhouse ale kind of guy.
Yeah, I can't.
It's a little sour for my taste.
Yeah, and you're being very nice because our audience is here, which is actually
there's a lot of different. Some farmhouses are real sour, and then some have another taste to them. They're not. I don't know. It's one of those styles that every time I try one, it seems like it's different. Like sometimes it's really real, like it is a sour, and then sometimes it's not very sour at all. I don't really understand the style very well.
James, have you ever considered?
It would be hard to reproduce the same style every time, given the way that beer is made. I don't know. I haven't made one yet.
I was going to say, have you ever considered making a recipe for a farmhouse and maybe doing a true to style if that's possible?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be welcome to use Omega's farmhouse strain because they claim that some of their yeast it'll ferment 90 degrees.
Yeah, we're going to do it this summer.
Yeah,
outside. We're going to ferment it outside.
Yeah,
just stick it in the garage. I like that. This is a good segue just because I was saying how James is not a huge fan of farmhouse, but he was saying it in a very polite way because of our audience. We had a listener who was giving me a hard time on Instagram because when we were doing our unpopular opinion section on last week's episode, I forgot to mention usernames, and I didn't go back. If I didn't mention you as well, feel free to give me a hard time and I'll mention you. I like to give credit where credit is due. I was going to make this awkward and be like, oh, this guy was so angry. He messaged me very angrily and he said mean things about us. He commented on my receding hairline. He said James talks funny and he said Todd is a monster. But no, he didn't. Don. I think Rainey is how you pronounce the last name, Reyny on Instagram, but his profile is private, so he may not allow you to follow him. He allowed me to follow him, just so I could apologize and say, hey buddy, I'm sorry. I was gonna,
so what did he say? I don't understand.
I took his unpopular opinion and he agreed. I believe it was one about sours basically, or pardon me, about IPAs,
okay,
not about sours. It's about IPAs. Because Todd, you're not on social media at all, but James can attest on our Instagram, and I can for sure attest on our Facebook that our opinions about IPAs are not that unpopular, or rather not that uncommon.
No, it's actually refreshing because I'm not the only one that feels that way about IPAs.
I know. I could see
it's a very broad statement to say I'm not on social media at all, too, by the way.
You post once
I checked my Facebook account sometime last week, and I do so at least once a month.
Yeah, that's my point.
Kind of close to once a month.
I'm on it, and arguably I could be addicted, but it's part of my day job, so I'm on it all the time. And I know James saw, this is my favorite one I've posted in a while, this meme that I did.
Yeah, that's definitely me.
Oh, I love it. I had a fun time with that photo in our Instagram story as well, because it's such a memeable pic. It's for audio only listeners, it's a picture of a furry trying to be friendly to a real dog, and the dog is leaning away as uncomfortably as you can. And so it's really low-hanging fruit for me to make a meme off it. So the first meme I did was titled the furry Hazy IPA, and then the dog I titled James. Haha. Low-hanging laughs, but I'll take them. I did one on our stories with sours and me. And then Todd, you would like this. I should email it to you. I sent one that says Joshua wanting a sincere and healthy working environment. And then the dog that's leaning away, I titled Todd Burns. And so I think it's a good description of our relationship. But anyway, Todd had criticized me from last week's episode of going too long with banter. So I'm going to jump right into this.
Well, hold on. I'm the one that criticized you, but I do want to banter about one more thing.
Oh, God. Go ahead.
So, a lot of you are probably familiar with Elysian Brewery. I hope I'm saying that name right.
Elysian, yeah.
They make like Space Dust IPA, and I'm trying to think. There's quite a few of them that people know that brewery fairly well. But anyway, I think it got bought out by Budweiser yesterday. So
oh wow,
another one bites
the dust.
What? When was that? You said, yeah, at least
yesterday. I saw the email about it yesterday. I'm not sure.
No way! Look at that. They've already the Wikipedia did just get updated. Yeah, that the parent company is AB InBev. Son of a gun.
Yep.
I didn't get that email. I didn't get the memo. Hey, another one bites the dust. Let me be positive. I bet there was a lot of money exchanged, and that's good for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I was doing an awkward smile for you audio-only listeners. All right, Todd. Todd, you've been talking too much this episode. Let's get right into the questions.
Well, let's do that.
Question number 1 comes from Jeremy K. Hey, Jeremy. We've taken his questions before. Hey, guys. So despite brewing for roughly 2 to 3 years now, I am just starting to get into lagering. I have been doing my own lagering in secondaries by placing the entire vessel with airlock attached into my kegerator to control the colder temperatures. Is there any reason that lagering could not be done in the keg? We happen to have a master lager in our presence. No, the man who I go to for all my for all my questions, period. That's the whole reason we have this show. James, what do you think?
Well, I think you probably can. You just got to remember if there's any kind of, and it wouldn't do that lagering, it's going to be cold. So the only thing that might happen is you're going to have proteins and everything fall down, even yeast particles. You're going to develop trub in the bottom of that keg. So be prepared for the first 2 or 3 pint glasses to have matter in it,
Yeah, and in some ways, I think that can be a good thing. In other words, because you can kind of suck it off the bottom by pouring the first few beers, and then it should get pretty clean. The other thing I know you've done before, James, a lot of our listeners have probably done, is they actually, if they're going to do that, they shorten the dip tube slightly, the long pickup.
Absolutely. Yep.
And then you kind of go around some of that, or go above some of that. I guess
you do. And, you would think if it's a little bit above the tube, it's kind of like when you're siphoning off into a keg from a fermenter, you can see some of that material come up through the dip tube. But when it's colder, it's less likely to do that, because it'll settle out at the bottom cold, and it'll stay there cold, versus when it's warm, it'll want to migrate up the tube, any kind of tube where it's liquid's running out of. But because it's cold, that's why you would want to shorten that tube length, is once it's compacted at the bottom and it's cold, it stays at the bottom. So unless that tube is right down in the middle of that trub, you won't pick a lot of that up. So that's a very good point.
One of the side paths I want to take off of this question, because there's a few ways we can go. One of them for me being, in your opinion, James and Todd, what would be the mindset behind doing your lagering in the keg? Is it to save on space? Is it a budgetary thing? Is it more efficient? Does it keep down oxidation? Yada, yada, yada. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
Well, I think you just answered them all. I mean, it yes. saves time. It doesn't you reduce the chance of oxidation. It saves space in whatever everybody has limited storage space. So why not just put it where you're fixing to dispense it, and then that gives you room wherever you're lagering to lager more product. So I think that you actually answered that question.
I'm going to frame your response in a digital photo frame for my office, where I feel validated that I've brought something to the table on this show. Todd, I know you are
congratulations.
Todd, I know you are a spoiled man in the world of draft beer equipment, and you have not ever lacked vessels to do cold crashing, lagering, fermentation, blah, blah, blah. Is this something, though, that you have ever done for the sake of convenience or space saving, or any of those other reasons we mentioned?
I mean, I've used it as a secondary fermenter on numerous occasions. I wasn't necessarily cold crashing those beers, so I guess no, but I've definitely used it as a secondary.
That's actually, I'm glad you mentioned that buzzword, because that's the second path I wanted to take it, cold crashing. James, I am a master of being confused. Is there a difference, technically speaking, between cold crashing a beer and lagering a beer? We've kind of on other episodes discussed, what makes a lager and an ale, and we have another yeast episode in the future at some point where we've talked about doing. But in the terms of the actual process of lagering, is that synonymous with cold crashing?
Well, this is my opinion that, of course you're going to lager. Lagers have used bottom fermenting yeast, and that's at a colder temperature, typically 50, 55 degrees. Now there's several steps that you have to take in the process of fermentation on lager. You got to remember the diacetyl rest. So what that means is with 25% of the sugars left to convert, you want to bring it up to room temp so it'll eat out the diacetyl as it's finishing the fermentation process. As soon as that's done, you cold crash it. And what that means is you bring it down to 30, in the mid to low 30 temp range. And then that is when you store it. Cold storage is another word for lagering. So you want to cold storage or lager that beer at that temperature for a given amount of time. So it gives two things. It helps condition the beer, and it also helps clarify the beer. So that's the whole purpose of that, and that's the way I see it in terms of lagering a beer.
Yeah, so the way I would answer it is all lagers are cold crashed, you could say, but not all beers that you cold crash are lagers.
Exactly right.
That's something about a square and a rectangle, or I forget.
No, I mean, so if you can still cold crash an ale. You're just bringing it down at the end to drop all those things down. I mean, you kind of cold crash it when you put it in a kegerator, I guess. That's why sometimes when you take a beer that you haven't secondary, or maybe you've even done a secondary, but say you haven't and you put it in a keg and then you move that keg straight into the kegerator and then you pour a beer and you're like, man, this is cloudy, and then it gets better. It's because you basically cold crashed it.
Sure. That's exactly right. And in fact, we do one of our most favorite beers that we brew, we lager. And what does that mean? Well, we do the regular fermentation and then we cold crash it and we lager it, and that's the Kolsch.
I was about to say,
the way they do it in Germany, and that's how you get the alt beer. They're done the same way, exactly the same way.
And on the internet, that is one of the biggest things of controversy when I see discussions on what is an alt beer and what they classify it as. Because I think we've had this discussion off air because the lead customer service and sales guy, Zach, was having an issue answering a question for a customer who said, the alt, it's a lager, right? And he was like, yeah. And then he was like, wait, no. Oh, no. What do I do? And it's because it's that confusing, like it uses ale yeast.
It does at colder temperatures, and then it's cold stored or lagered.
Exactly. So it's very, it is the best beer in the world. That's for sure. But it is an enigma. But yeah, back to the Kolsch too.
Very hard to brew too. So
very.
Todd, you can back me up on this. We've brewed alts for a long time, and there's a noticeable difference in taste if you condition it right.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you taste it green, for lack of a better word, it definitely tastes a lot different than after you age it. So.
It does. Yep.
Well, and one of the things, the opposite, I think we've maybe even talked about this before. One of the opposite beers would be a steam beer, or like Anchor Steam, where they're actually brewing it.
They're doing the opposite. They're using a lager yeast at L temperatures.
At L temperatures, so yeah,
that's pretty amazing when you think about it, because you've been conditioned that lager yeast has to be in a certain temperature, and then here is a lager yeast that is fermented at L room temp, and it's just it's weird.
Kind of a lower room temp, because it was originally brewed in San Francisco, so it's not very hot there. I mean, it's not. It's fairly cold, but it's maybe in the mid 60s, I would say, James. Versus
yeah. I think ideal. We use Imperial makes a really good. It's called Cable Car.
Oh yeah,
and they make a really good steam beer yeast, and that thing is actually awesome at lagering at a regular lager yeast temps in the 50s. It makes a great beer.
We could just say that about all Imperial yeast, right? That they're just
make a great product. So, and I promise they don't give me any kickbacks, but I really like their product. When they make something good, I'm going to say something about it.
I've been trying to get kickbacks. Trust me. Owen, I'm looking at you, buddy. No, I'm kidding. I haven't really. They probably actually. I say it not. Owen is nice enough, and Casey over there. If I was to say like, hey, how about I drop y'all's name in exchange for yeast, and they'd be like, you don't even have to drop our name. Just what address do you want to ship to?
I was gonna actually say you do get a little bit of a kickback, James. Because I haven't seen you pay for yeast in a while, right?
I have a couple of times, to be fair, but for the most part, I don't. It's research and development, I think, is what I say.
Absolutely.
And I research and develop that every night when I come home.
I am a huge supporter of your R&D work, my friend.
We all are, yeah.
I can't say good enough things about the beer that is on tap up there at headquarters right now. I don't
know, guys. I will have to say this. I give props to Todd. One of the best beers I've had in the last 12 months was one that he brewed.
That ESB or which one?
Yes, the ESB. That was phenomenally good.
Yeah, it's still sitting in my kegerator waiting for my drinking to come back.
Oh, can you imagine how much better it's going to taste?
Wow. If Josh doesn't polish it off before I jump back on that wagon.
Oh, I'm going to be there the Monday before the Friday.
Jump off the wagon. You get on the wagon or off the wagon?
That's
off
a Seinfeld episode. I don't remember that Seinfeld episode. No, you get off the wagon because you fell. What's the deal with Ovaltine? Anyway,
I fell off the wagon. That's right. Yeah, so you get. Well, I'm going to get off the wagon and go right to my kegerator.
Yeah, I will see about that because there's not a whole lot of that ESB left, and I'm coming up, like I said, the Monday before you start drinking again.
Oh, that kegerator's not working right now. So.
Oh man. You may need to bring that over here and let me store it at my house.
Oh boy, there you go.
Oh, James, always a team player. All right.
I've got that winter warmer. I've got 10 gallons of it that's been sitting in my countertop, which I keep saying I'm going to cold crash, but I haven't been able to get enough stuff out of my fridges to do it. But it's been so cold. It's been so cool in there. It's not really cold crash, but I looked at it the other day, and it's probably averaging like 60 degrees in that room.
Oh, that's perfect.
God, it's so clear. I don't even see a reason to cold crash it at this point. So
that's cool. Yeah, I can't wait to try that too.
When are you going to keg it, Todd? Just so I can plan accordingly.
I'm going to keg it. I'll keg it next week. I mean, I plan on trying it the first night. That Friday night. God, there's a lot of things I'm going to try. Maybe I shouldn't try that one the first night since I don't know what it is. I think it's 8% or something. It's that winter warmer that I made.
Oh yeah.
I was going to have it for Christmas, and I'm still conditioning it. So
it's going to be great.
Wow. Todd's liver just called in, said help. Anyway,
it's got a good break. It's ready.
It is ready. I'm looking forward to you getting back on that wagon, man. No, falling off the wagon. Well, anyway, Jeremy, thank you so much for submitting the question. We have one more question before we wrap this show up. Submitted from Matthew using the submission form at homebrewhappyhour.com. Matthew wrote in, hey, Josh, James, and Todd. First off, I want to say thanks for doing the show. I've been binge listening for a while now and enjoy your humorous banter and zeal for the hobby very much, and the new video format is great too. Matthew figured out the formula on how to get his question on the show. I have been brewing for a few years now, but have just made the transition to all-grain brewing, using the single-vessel brew in a bad technique. I love the greater variability and quality that all-grain brewing offers, and am excited to learn everything I can. Along those lines, I've been poring over every recipe I can find, examining the differences, and trying to reverse engineer and decipher why a particular grain bill was chosen so I may better understand the ingredients I use and start building my own recipes in the future. In my research, I have noticed that grain selection varies widely from recipe to recipe, even within the same style. For example, one Irish red ale might use pale two-row malt as a base, while another might use Maris Otter, while a third might use a combination of the two. One grain bill is probably more true to style than another, but I'm sure there has to be more to it than that, right? I was wondering if you could discuss the differences between types of malt, how these choices affect the finished beer, and why a brewer would choose one over another for a given style. I know this is kind of a big subject, but any information you can share would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for taking my question and for the podcast. So yes, massive question, but the gist of it is, and it's a good one. The reason I really did include it is because we've talked about base malts before, but we haven't really talked about their in specific recipes, right? Because there are different uses for different malts. There's different accessibility in parts of the world, or at least at one point in time, to different malts. But James, can you touch on the surface level at first of what Matthew's asking about differences between types of malt and how those choices affect your finished beer?
Yeah, there's a lot. In fact, that's also one of those conversations that you may get a different answer from a different brewer than what I have to say, because opinions vary quite a bit when it comes to base malts. But basically, here's the way I look at it. If you're looking at wanting to brew your basic IPA or American craft beer, you're never going to go wrong with two-row. Two-rows, the most common. A lot of people call it pale malt. There's no difference. Pale malt, two-rows, the same thing. And it's a good choice, especially if you're wanting to start off in homebrewing and doing all grain. That would be a good one to keep in the closet to buy by the 55-pound. In fact, I used to have Todd. He'd go to Austin so much he'd pick up two-row for us when we were brewing quite a bit, and so that's what I started off using on just about every grain bill that I had was two-row, because it's so versatile. Another thing about it is it's on the color scale, it's probably between 2 and 2.5 Lovibond. So it's got a good light color. It's not as light as Pilsner malt, but it's also a fuller tasting malt compared to Pilsner. Now, Pilsner, why would you use Pilsner over two-row? Well, Pilsner's it's a lighter tasting, lighter colored malt. For a good example would be like if you brewed a two-row and you want to do a Kolsch, and you could do two. We could do one with the Pilsner, or we could do one with the two-row. I can guarantee you would taste a big difference between the two-row Kolsch and a Pilsner, because a Pilsner's designed to be a lighter malt, if that makes sense. It has a light taste. It doesn't have as fuller bodied taste as two-row. Not a huge difference, but enough that you would notice on your palate.
Or you might. I don't know if I would, but you might.
I think you would. I think most people would. I think that they could tell. They would think they were different beers for the most part. Wouldn't you agree, Todd?
Yeah, no, you could definitely tell the difference between that and I mean, any of the base malts, I mean, Maris Otter, any of the base malts will have subtle differences. I guess the Maris is going to have more of a biscuit taste.
Yeah. And for the most part, most of these base malts are two-row. They're not six-row. So we're just talking about two-row barley. And the Maris Otter,
I've heard Maris Otter called premium two malt.
It is, yeah.
Two-row. Premium two-row, yeah.
A lot of people would say you can substitute Maris Otter with two-row. And for the most part, that's true. Maris Otter is from Europe, specifically England, in that area. In fact, Ireland has a different style of Maris Otter that they use, and it's all in how they malt. You got to remember, too, American two-row is a highly modified malt, so it doesn't require any other mashing steps. It's ready to go out the gate. And it also has they call it diastatic power. If you do another, like a good example would be six-row. So if we're doing two same beers, one with six-row and one with two-row, you're actually going to get higher gravity out of the two-row than you will with the six-row, because it has a higher diastatic power than the six-row. So that's another reason why two-row is used by so many craft brewers, because you get bigger bang for your buck.
That's interesting to me how or what became base malts for these recipes. I mean, obviously, I think a short answer, why choosing this or this, is the historic significance of the malt in that style, right? It ceases to be
the region,
right? It ceases to be that, like he used a Irish red ale. If you're not using what they were using, you can. I was going to say bastardize it, but that's not the proper term to use. You could, you can make your own using
a variation of that,
or it becomes an American red ale. I mean,
you're
using different malts. Sure,
that's what I mean.
But one thing that I use and I consider is the taste profile and the color. Another example would be like Vienna malt. Vienna malt is used.
James likes Vienna malt. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah. So you can take Vienna malt and use it to do Vienna lagers, which I love. And then you can also mix it. It's a little darker malt than what a pale malt would be, or a Maris Otter. It's about double. It's 4, and but it has enough. It's still a good base malt, but it's real sweet. So it has typically a sweeter, maltier profile than would be a Pilsen or a two-row. But for the most part, different base malts are used for different styles of beer because that's what they used in the region when that beer was designed. And so you always take that into consideration. If you use them enough, you can manipulate that grain bill to kind of create just about anything you want. But it's fun.
Josh, you remember that Vienna lager that James brewed?
Oh my, do I ever? Oh my gosh.
Sorry, I haven't heard a word he said since we started talking about Vienna lager. I've just been thinking about that beer and how much he should brew it again.
Yeah, you need to do that. And then the last one would be the Munich malt, and that would be used more in like a Oktoberfest or a Maybach, where you want a really deep, malty, toasty, everything that makes an Oktoberfest what it is in the base malts, and it's usually Munich malt.
Is there a malt that is authentically American? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, two-row.
Well,
standard American two-row.
Okay.
If you want to say authentic American barley, it's probably 6-row because that's what all the big boys used, and they've been using it for years. And it's just because there's more grain on a stalk, and it's pretty neutral in flavor too. So.
Now, for our health conscious friends, is that GMO free, James? Is it, or is it built in a lab?
Can be.
It can be, but I probably would say no.
Oh, I'm totally kidding. I like my barley with extra GMO. How do you think I maintain this boyish figure of mine if I don't add chemicals or I add steroids to my barley? It's not even a living.
I had one guy ask me if I've ever brewed a barley that is gluten-free.
Gluten-free. Yeah.
And that didn't even sound good.
There is a good bit I'll have to link into this episode. When the last time Todd and I and some of the other guys got to go to Great American Beer Festival was when the Conan O'Brien show sent Triumph the Insult Comic Dog. He did a segment there, and he was interviewing. I want to say it was not Sierra Nevada. It was from Sierra Nevada, and one of their guys who, small world, we ran into at Homebrew Con in Baltimore.
Remember that because you asked him about it.
You remember? I said, "Oh my god, dude, this is gonna be really weird." But were you on the Conan O'Brien show in a segment? And he was like, "Oh my god." Yeah. Well, we were all drinking at that point. My memory gets really clear when I'm drinking. But anyway, long story short, he was. They were talking about a gluten-free beer, and so Triumph, it goes up to his head, and he goes, "I don't want to talk to you more. I just want to sniff the area where your balls used to be." And that's the. No offense intended to anyone suffering from celiac or who prefers gluten-free. It was just funny. It made me laugh. I have to preface everything now. But anyway, I think, James, we've talked about, doing episodes in the future again on base categories, like another yeast episode.
Yeah.
I think, how many freaking episodes could we produce about malt? A
lot, because then we haven't even touched into the roasted malts or the caramel malts or the specialty malts, and then they have acid malts that you can use to modify the pH of the water to create a different style. There's millions of ways that you can use malt, and everything's subjective for the most part, and people's opinions on how to use what with what and percentages. And I think it's just fun to experiment, especially when your boss has an awesome collection of grains upstairs.
So I guess on the gluten-free, sorghum is the number one grain, I would think, for gluten-free, right? But what other grains? I guess anything, right? Anything but, well, it can't be wheat, and it can't be barley at all. So
yeah. So you don't think they make a gluten-free barley?
I don't think, not that I'm aware of.
I'm just asking because that's an area I've never touched or wanted to, but now there's people.
Okay. So this is saying there's a site just for gluten-free beer. They're saying besides sorghum, millet, buckwheat, rice, and I'm going to butcher this last one. It's real quinoa.
Corn?
Quinoa, Todd. Quinoa.
Quinoa. See, I told you I'd butcher it.
I love it. I should have just let you go and let the listeners butcher you. But
how do you say it again?
Quinoa.
Quinoa.
Quinoa. Remember when I lost
Quinoa.
all that weight 5 years ago? And
Yeah.
I ate a lot of quinoa back then. I eliminated wheat, grain, and sugar. And while I did lose like 62 pounds, I was miserably skinny. I couldn't even lift Todd. I couldn't bench press him anymore. That's
so quinoa is it good? I mean, do you like it? I've had it before, like in a dish, but I don't remember we had it somewhere.
Todd, do I look like I enjoy quinoa? Look at this body.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's really, really good. I don't know.
No, I'm back to the eggs and bacon diet, my friend.
Okay, good. That's my diet. That's perfect.
Yeah, you're the epitome. Yeah, cigars, beer, eggs, and bacon.
Yep.
Heart attack special is what I'm calling that. Anyway, thank you, Matthew. I had to look back up at the question because I was about to wrap it up. Guys, that does it for today's show. I really appreciate y'all again taking the time. If it makes y'all feel better, I've been getting feedback on our social media channels and especially email from people who have really enjoyed us all three doing the show again more regularly since it was the holiday season and not naming names, but Todd was out a bunch. And then,
trying first of the year.
And then Todd was out again. But before we do wrap up, I want to make a note to the listeners because I think it's in a month, right, where you guys are doing the annual trip to Dusseldorf. Is that in February or is it in March this year?
We're doing it in March. We normally do it in January, but my wife and I, for our 20th anniversary, we're going to Hawaii, which we canceled because we got super busy here. So I guess we could have gone, but we really couldn't have because we were really busy. So it works out great. Yeah, we're going in March.
Okay, so it's March. I was going to say, because that is an episode too where we will have to coordinate because as much as I like, or as much as I'm thankful, rather, I don't necessarily like it, being able to do the one-off interviews or whatever, I think having y'all in Germany and then maybe even bringing back, Stefan is a very popular guest, believe it or not, with our audience. And so maybe we can get him back on the show.
That'd be fun. Yeah, let's do that. I wonder if we could it'd be fun to do video with Stefan.
Yeah, we could do it at Schlussel.
Oh, you guys suck.
Yeah.
James has been waiting this long because of that video you and I made, Todd, where I filmed you going, I wish James was here.
Remember we went to the place that he's never been. And I can't remember the name of it now, where we had it's the newer, hipper place.
Kurtz. It's
Kurtz. Yeah. So we got a call from Stefan the other day, and he was going over there to set up their new draft beer system. They're going to be using all C. and Becker stuff there. So maybe we should do one from there, James.
Yeah, definitely.
Stefan's got an in there,
Yeah.
Y'all do whatever you want.
And you've never been. Only Josh has been,
It's where I'll tell you this, though, heads up. It's where Stefan told us before we went, it's where all the young people hang out. And Todd could have easily been all of their dad. Like he was old enough
grandfather to possibly.
On
yeah,
some
they
of them
were young.
There were some of them where I could have been their stepdad for sure. Like, second marriage, kind of gross divorce thing where the mom went for a younger guy. I could have been that, but wasn't quite old enough to be anyone's dad. But anyways, I'm wrapping this up. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. We will catch you again next week. Thank you, fellas.
Bye.
And that will do it for this episode of the Homebrew Happy Hour. If you have a question you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, visit homebrewhappyhour.com and click on the submitted question link at the top of the page, or now you can call them in by dialing 325-305-6107 and leave your message after the beep. Thank you to our show sponsor, ketconnection.com, for supporting our podcast and the homebrewing community. Go to ketconnection.com and use the promo code HHH to receive 5% off your order. On behalf of Todd Burns, James Carlson, and the Pearl Media Network, I'm Joshua Stubing. Thank you for listening.